Hello and welcome to this recording on the fundamentals of the Sophos XG Firewall REST API. So in this video, I'll introduce you to this powerful tool and feature of the Sophos XG Firewall and hopefully enable you to use this in a creative and innovative ways in your environment, especially if you work in an organization that's embraced infrastructure as code, where you build your infrastructure using a deployment pipeline with automation in line with DevOps principles. So quick introduction about what I'll go through with you today. So I'll start by going through some basic information, and this will cover things like how to configure the REST API on the Sophos XG firewall, the log files to look for, to look at if you're experiencing issues, how to add users for API authentication. So this is strongly recommended and to avoid using the default admin account. I'll then cover some initial demonstrations of what this can do. So then I'll take a step back and go through getting information. How do you get information about how to build your Sophos XG firewall REST API templates that you can use both for deployment and for management and for troubleshooting. And also how to get information about the structure of the templates. Then I'll show you some really good way, a very easy way to create the templates. And also I'll just cover briefly some of the operations that you can do with this feature. Then we'll get to the demo stage where I'll go through some really interesting demonstration. I'll introduce you to the lab environment in a moment here, but the demonstration I'll be doing here will be configuring a site-to-site VPN between two cloud-hosted Sophos XG firewalls that are hosted on Microsoft Azure, and automate that process of creating that site-to-site VPN. And you see how simple or how easy this is when using this method. Then finally, I'll cover some security methods or some security principles, how you can secure this feature or this tool. APIs are increasingly becoming targets for hackers, and because most engineers, this is something that's new to them, they're not too familiar with this. And what most engineers do is just configure things with the default. And many hackers are beginning to target APIs, so we'll help you avoid that mistake when we go through step 4 in this. So before going any further, I'd like to introduce you to the test environment that I'll be using today for the demonstrations. So as you can see here, I have two Sophos XG firewall hosted in Microsoft Azure, one hosted in the Azure West Europe region and one hosted in the Azure East US region. Of course, they've got internet access with their public IP addresses, and they've each got LAN networks also, local area networks also. So I also have the system that I'll be using for management. So it's an Ubuntu server, and it's the one that I'm going to be using to deploy the templates that I'm creating and to deploy those templates to the Sophos XG firewalls making REST API calls. So I have this laptop, which is the one that I'm actually recording on right now. I've called it my build laptop. I have GitHub Desktop already installed on it, and I have Microsoft Visual Studio Code installed on this also. I also have other tools such as Postman, which I'll just make mention of, also installed on this laptop. So this is a laptop that I'll be creating my template from. And what I'll now do is I'll be storing those templates in GitHub, which will be my source, my versioning system, where I'll be storing my templates. And then on my management system, I'll be retrieving the templates and I'll be deploying them to the Sophos XG firewalls. So that's the demo that I'll be doing today. So let's get right into this then. So not to give too much information, when we're talking about managing the Sophos XG firewall using REST API, It's in line with the popular concept these days in networking of network programmability and network automation. The CLI, it's a very good tool that we've used a lot in networking. But one of the things with the CLI is that it's not agile enough. There's a tendency for it to hold back application deployment, especially when um, other aspects of IT have adopted the DevOps principles and where they're deploying applications using a deployment pipeline of continuous integration, continuous testing, continuous deployment. But the network infrastructure or the network security infrastructure can be a part that holds this back. So the whole point of having REST API exposed in the Sophos XG Firewall and network security appliance is that this enables you to be able to program your network so you can interact with it with scripts, things like using things like Python or with different automation tools. Some of which I will just make mention of, but I may have videos where I just demonstrate some of those to you later. So basic information. So let's start first of all. I'll jump on one of the Sophos XG firewalls that I have in this environment here. I'll jump on one of these. And actually, we just jump on both of them. And what we'll do is, first of all, we'll enable the API. So let's go to this. So you can see my Azure dashboard. You can see my Sophos XG firewalls here. And I'm logged into the web admin of them. So this is the one in East US, and this is the one for West Europe. So to enable the REST API on the Sophos XG firewall, I'll go on the web admin system, backup and firmware, and API. So let's do that on both. So on the system, backup and firmware, I can see API there. So I've actually enabled this on the or enabled it on this. So I'll go have a quick look on this, see if it's enabled also. Yeah, it's enabled also. But if it's not enabled, all you need to do is tick this button or tick this checkbox to enable it. And then you have to configure your allowed IP address. Allowed IP address is the IP address of the management server that you'll be using for deployment, for management, for troubleshooting, for automation. Any management server that you'll be using, you should add them to this list. So do not make the mistake of allowing all. So treat this as your first layer of defense, of defending and this tool, this powerful tool I should add. So what I'll do is if I go back here, you can see the IP address of my management system is 52.171.222.142. And I have 52.171.222.142 already added here, and then I apply that, and that's enabled the REST API of the Sophos XG firewall. And if I do the same on this one, so it's enabled, my IP address added, I apply that, and that's applied successfully. Okay, so let's move on here. So I've enabled it, I've added allowed IP addresses. Some quick information about if things are not going right, the log files to look at. I'll just leave this here and I won't go into too much details about this, but that's just for your information. If you see our messages and you don't understand and you want to get more information, this log files can give you more information about this. So after enabling REST API on the Sophos XG firewall, the next thing I'll do is I'll add another user that I'll be using for authentication when making the calls. So this is very important. I do not want to use my admin account or the default admin account for doing this. That this is not a good practice to do this. As a matter of fact, you probably be preferred to have a different account that has less privileges. So we'll talk about that when we get to the role-based access control section. So what I'll do is I'll go on the web admin. For both of them, again, I'll do this for both firewalls. I'll go on the configure authentication, and I'll go on the users. And what I'll do is I'll add the new user account, and I'll get the information about the users I'll be creating here. Username API user, and then let's get the password also. And we get a password, and this is very important for me to select the user type as an administrator, because this account will be used to administer this appliance via REST API. So I'll select administrator. For now, I'll leave it selected as the administrator profile. So we'll discuss this in details later. Give it an email address, API user. I put it into a group, and I'll just save this. And the same thing that I just did now, I'll go do the same on this one. So I'll go on the authentication, go on the users, and add a new user. So API user 01, API user 01, enter the password, administrator, select the administrator profile, and leave that as open group. And I'll save that also. Oh, okay. Go to enter the email. Let's go API user and save this. So now we have a user account that we can use to authenticate when making the REST API calls. So the next thing that's left for us to do is to begin to test this and see. Now in testing this, what I'll do is if I go back to this, I'll just do a quick demo of let's get some information from our appliances. So what I'll do is I have a line here, which I'm just going to be using call, which is a popular Linux tool. Dash K is very important because that says to ignore the certificate check. That's very, very important because I'm currently using self-signed certificates, and the CA that signed the certificate is not yet installed on my Ubuntu management system. If this were to be your production system, you probably don't want to use this method. You want to get a proper certificate in with the CA trusted on your management system, as that can be a good layer of security also. But just for this demonstration, I'll go ahead and just use this. Actually, you know what? Let's make this a bit bigger so I can share some of this with you. So you can see I will be accessing the firewalls through port 4444. I'll be going on the web console API controller, and then I'll be passing this request to it. So that's my request. Login with the username that I just created and put on the password there. And I'm getting IP hosts in the request. So what am I trying to do here? What I'm trying to do is if I go on the system, on the hosting services, I have IP host here. I want to list all the existing IP host definitions on this firewall. So let's go ahead and do that. This is for the West Europe firewall. So I'll copy that name and let's go down here, paste the code there. So I've got IP address here, but so you can either use the IP address or you can use the name. In this case, I'll use the public DNS name. And what I'll do is I'll copy this entire code and I'll go to my Ubuntu management system, which I'm logged into here. I'll paste this and I'll press enter. And that was successful because what I can now see is that I've made the API call. I can see the information of all the IP host definitions on my firewall here. and then I can start making set requests, add additions, modifications if I want to. But then you can see here, I've got this for this firewall. I can do the same thing, and actually let's go do the same thing for my firewall in East US. So I'll get the name of the East US firewall, and I'll do the same thing here. So East US firewall this time, and I'll clear the screen, paste that, and that's successful also. So one thing I want to show you here is I have another, actually, you know what I'll do is I'll just go, yeah, I have another Ubuntu server that I provisioned in Azure. I called it Ubuntu bad 01. So it's not actually a bad Ubuntu machine. It's just a machine that I want to show you that this machine is not listed under the added IP addresses. So it's not added on the machines, on the IP addresses that are authorized to make API calls. So what I'll do is I'll log into this machine, this Ubuntu machine. And make this a bit clearer for you. Let's make it 12. Yeah, that's better. And what I'll do is I'll try to make the same API call from this machine that's not added on the allowed IPs. So let's see what happens. Oh, okay, so I got the wrong one. So I want is this one. So let's clear the screen. Let's paste that and present that, and you can see the message I get back. API operations are not allowed from the requester IP address. And the reason for that is simple. The reason for that is because on the backup and firmware on the API, the IP address is not listed here. So the XG firewall didn't allow that to be successful. Okay, so that's quick introduction for you. Let's move on from there. So now I've just come over here and I've just dumped some line of template slash code on your screen. You may be going, okay, I can begin to see with the power of this. The issue is if I need to start building my own templates that I'll be using for my API calls, if I need to start building my own templates, where do I get the information from of how I can start building and designing this? So I'm just breaking this down for you. So one thing to mention is that, as you could probably tell, that this is an XML-based REST API, not JSON-based yet. It's an XML-based REST API. Where do you get the information about how to construct this template from? Let's start from the first one. First one is go on Sophos website. So I click on this option, go on Sophos website, on the documentation website. It's going to ask me for the product I need documentation from. I go for Sophos XG Firewall and let that run. And then it's going to ask me for select the version. So I'll select Sophos XG Firewall version 16.5 because that's what I'm running on my XG appliances. And let's see. And then it's done that. And then right down here, I can see API help here. Now, if I click on this option, it's going to download a zip folder, a zip directory here that if I go show in folder, well, actually, I'll just go straight to my download folder. Yeah, I can go straight to my download folder and I can extract this. So extract it and open it afterwards. So when this is extracted and opened, it contains information about the API, the structure of the different sections of the firewall. So I'll just wait for this to finish extracting. And now I can go into the directory. I can open the index.html file, and that takes me to this very nice web page here, where I can begin to drill down and see different things. So for example, if I go on the system, I go on the host and services, I go on the hosts, I can see add IP host here. So this was the one that I did show you earlier, get. So I can either get, or I can add, I can edit, I can delete, and it gives you the structure. So you can see IP hosts, name, the family, and it gives you information about this. What about if you want to use this to add a firewall rule? You just look for the right section. So this is in line with the Sophos XG itself. So I'm on the system here. If I go to the firewall, that is everything's contained on the system here. So firewall rules on the protect firewall. If I go back here, go on the protect firewall rule, and I can see that here, and I can drill down, and this gives me the structure that I need if I need to create a firewall rule, and the different options or the different settings that I can have, and the parameters are explained down here also. So it's a very useful way to get information about if you want to start creating standard templates for your deployment. This is one good way. The next way that I have here is using this option of import and export. So this can be also very useful. So what do I mean by that? Actually, I will tie this in with number C here, which is the easiest way that I know of to create your standard templates. So what you probably want to do is you can go to Sophos XG Firewall, make any configuration that you want to have, right? So after making the configuration that you want to have, what you now want to do is you want to go on the backup and firmware, go on the import and export the configuration that you just made. So an example will be, I go on the host and services, IP host, I just add a new host. Call this test, IPv4, give it an IP address of 1.1.1.1 and save that. And then what I can do is I can go on the backup and firmware on the import and export. I can export selective configuration and search for IP host, select that, apply that, and I can export that. And what will happen, notice I did not select include dependent entity, because that will just make the export file larger and the file may be difficult to read at that point. But what this one will show me is that it's going to export what I currently have configured on the IP host, and then I can use that to start building my standard templates that I could easily modify in the future. To me, this is a really easy way to get your standard template going that you can have in a source control system that you can start modifying to build your deployment templates. So good one there. So let's move on. Certain operations also. So you notice that the call that I made earlier, that was a get call. So let's scroll down again. So that was me. If I go back, that was a get call. So rather than doing a get, I could also do a set. And if I decide to do a set, right? Because this was a get call. I'm just getting current information and then it just showed me all the current information. But rather than doing a get, I could do a set. But when doing a set, there are different operations that you could do. So for example, with set, I could be adding a new configuration. I could be updating an existing configuration. I could be deleting or removing a configuration. So there are different operations that you could do on the set. So that's what this is referring to. You could be adding, you could be removing, you could be updating, you could be modifying an existing configuration. So those are the operation options that you have. So now to the interesting part. Let's do some quick test here. Now the first one that I showed you by doing by using call from a Ubuntu command line. I could also just use a browser, or I could just use something like Postman. So I've got Postman installed on this. I won't be demoing Postman today, but I could just use a browser. So it's an illustration. If I go down here, I have this operation that I have. So let's go back. So the first thing I need to do is, because I'll be making this call from my machine, what I need to do is I need to add my IP address into the list of allowed IP addresses to make API calls. So I need to go back and make sure I have my IP address in there. So add my IP and apply that. Otherwise, if I don't add my IP, you saw what happened earlier, it's going to fail. So I've added my IP here. So what I could do is I could go get this, which is just basically a web URL. So HTTPS, my IP address, port 444, the web admin port, /web console /API controller, and then the requests that I'm making. So I make the request, I log in first of all, I authenticate to my admin username and my password. I define the type of operation I want to perform, in which case, let me just do this one first to get using a browser this time. So let's go back here. Let's replace this with the West Europe Firewall public DNS name. And let's go. I have my username, API user 01, and I have my password there, and I have the get there. So what I'll do is I'll copy this. I'll open a new browser tab and I'll just paste and go. Must have missed something here. Sophos XG Azure westero.westero.cloud app. Oh, there we go. It's not .co, it's .com. And there you go. I've just run this from the browser and I can see all the current. You can see authentication successful. Basically the same thing that we saw from the command line or the Ubuntu management system earlier. So this is just a get and I can see that here. So this is for the West Europe firewall. So if I go to the West Europe firewall and I go on the hosting services on the IP host, I'll get rid of this test. And what I'll try to do is just from the browser, I could try to make a get request, sorry, a set request to add a new object here. So we can see the existing ones that we have. So let's go do that. So what I'll do is I'll copy this. And let's get the right domain FQD in there. And the admin username or the API authentication. My username is API user 01 and that's my password there. Yep, so I have my password. And what I'm doing here is I'm adding a new IP host named API test1, an IP address of 1.1.1.1, and the subnet, and this is set requests. And what I'll do is I'll copy this, go to my browser, paste and go, and you can see configuration applied successfully. If that's a bit small, let's make that a bit larger. So you can see configuration applied successfully, and I can go to my Sophos firewall. Now let's reset that. And if I refresh this, I can see my new object here, API test 01 created, right? And I could just go on and on, just go delete that, go back, refresh the page, go back to my firewall, refresh it, it's back there. So this is, and obviously the same way that I'm just doing this from the browser, I could program this right with some form of script, batch script, bash shell scripting, or I could use Python if I wanted to. On my from my Ubuntu management system and make the same calls to achieve the same things. So let's move on here. So one interesting one that I want to show you also, so I want to show you this one, to show you the power of this. So I have these two firewalls here. Now I want to create site-to-site VPN connection between these two firewalls, one in East US, one in West Europe. And I want to do that using this whole elaborate system that I've built. And that's if you're embracing infrastructure as code. So what I'll do is with my built laptop, I already have some templates built. So if I bring up Visual Studio Code, you can see I have a template here built for East US. I have a template built here for West Europe. And I can version them, right? I'm going to be storing this on GitHub. And what I'll do is, you can see there's no username or password currently stored in those now. I will just add the username and password right now, so I can show you this. So let's add username to the first template, username to the second template, and then let's add password also. And add the password. And I'll just save this using Control S. And you can go through the template. So I'll put the links in the description below. As you can see in the template, first thing is I'm making a request. I'm logging in using my API and the username and password I created for making API calls. Then I'm defining the operation I'm making, which is a set operation, and I'm adding new configuration. And which configurations am I adding? Number one is I'll be adding two new host definitions or network definitions. I'll be adding a network definition called East US LAN with the address, network address, and subnet. And I'll be adding another one called West Europe LAN with the network address and subnet address. Then I'll be adding a new VPN connection with the name, define the connection type, the policy type, even define the pre-shared key, define all the necessary information for the VPN connection. And after that, I'll be adding firewall rules to allow traffic between the two LANs. So I'll be creating two new firewall rules. And then at the end, I'm making another set operation. So I create the VPN connection, I create two firewall rules, I create two host definitions, and at the end, I'll update my VPN connection to activate it, to enable it. So, and I'll be doing the same thing on both sides. I'll be doing that on the West Europe, um, firewall, and on the East US firewall, right? So now I'm just making change. So just think about this as my build system. I'm making changes to the template. I have the standard templates that I have saved in my versioning system. I'm making changes to them, and after making changes, I go to my GitHub desktop, which has already detected that there's changes, and it's showing me that I didn't have the username and password in there before, but now I have the username and password. So now I can go commit this to master, added credentials, and then I can give some description if I wanted to. So this is kind of like a change control system. So I commit to master, and once I commit to master, if I wanted to, which I'll do now, I'll push this to my GitHub account. So I'll push, and it's going to let me know once it's done. And that's done. And then if I go back here and I refresh my GitHub, I can see that these templates have been modified. It says added credentials, that's the description or the title that I gave to the changes that I made. So what I'll do is I'll open these two templates from GitHub, and I'll go to the raw formats. That's what I need. And I'll make notes of this URL. So from the diagram, what I've done in this case is now I have my template built here. I've pushed it to my source control system. Now I'm going to jump on this Ubuntu management system and retrieve this template and deploy them to this too. Now before I do that, let me just show you that there's nothing currently configured on this firewall. So I go to firewall rule. There's only the default firewall rule, no other firewall rule, right? Go on the VPN connection. There's no VPN connection. Go on the host and services. There's no West Europe or East US LAN definitions there. And it's the same for this one. So I can get rid of this one we use for testing. So you can see there's no East or West Europe LAN here. I go on the VPN. There's no VPN connection. There's no firewall rules. And I'll create all this by just making simple calls. And you begin to see the power of this, right? So let's go over to what I have in Notepad here. And the first thing I'll do is for my management system is I'll just download this. So I need to see if I've downloaded this before so I can get rid of it. Let's clear this first. Let's list, and I'll just remove this. So that's gone. So clear. Okay. So I'll have two SSH sessions open to my Ubuntu management system. So there's nothing there. So let's go back. I'll just get the templates that are already pushed to GitHub directly on this management system. So that for East US, I'll do that at the top. And that's for West Europe. And I'll do that here. And that's pulled down to my management system now. Now, if I list, I can see my two templates here now. So now we're taking it a bit further. So rather than defining the old template from the command line or using a URL, what I'll be doing in this case is I'm saying call -k again and ignore certificate checks for now. Again, that's not a good idea in production. Define the name of the firewall, the address, the URL for the API of the XG firewall for the East US, and then -f to say I'm passing a file to you, and then define the file that I'm passing. I'm passing XG VPN template for East US. I'm passing it, and I'll do the same for both firewalls. So I'll copy that for this other firewall, and I'll copy this for the East US, which I'll leave at the top here, and I'll press enter and enter, and let's see what happens. And in the background, what it's going to be doing is it's going to be validating the yep, and that looks to have done. That looks okay to me. that looks done. You can see configuration applied successfully. Now if I go back, first of all, I go to my hosting services. I can see I have two new definitions here. I go to the other firewall and I have two new definitions here. I go under my firewall rule and I have two new firewall rules here to allow traffic from VPN to LAN, from LAN to VPN. And if I go on the firewall rule on the other firewall, I have firewall rule to allow from LAN to VPN, VPN to LAN. I go on the VPN and I can see there's a new VPN connection all connected. And if I go back under here and go on the VPN also, I can see the VPN connection here also, and the VPN connection is all connected. And that's just now how difficult or what process do I have to go through if I have to be doing that manually? It's much easier to maintain this template, right? And have this. It saves a lot of time, it saves a lot of error, it's all version controlled. It just makes things much more effective for a network engineer. So they're amazing things. We talked about network automation earlier. They're amazing things that we could do. So in this case, we could even do something such that, let's say we have a CM system here, right? We have a CM system and logs have been transferred from the firewall to the CM system. And if we see certain activities from our monitoring, we could trigger a script that will execute on the management system and dynamically add IP addresses, maybe to firewall rules for blocking, or dynamically configure things like things like blocking, IPS blocking, or any other security features of the Sophos XG firewall, and all that can be automated thanks to this REST API feature of the Sophos XG firewall. And you can see the power of this. I've just literally within seconds configured IPsec connection between two firewalls in an instant, just like that. So to me, I think that's really cool. So to end, I'll just quickly go through this. And I'll just check the time in here. Yeah, so I'll just quickly go through this. So now with more power comes more responsibility, right? So I had to go quickly switch off my heat in there. Okay, so what I was saying before I paused the recording was that with much power comes more responsibility. So you can obviously see that this is a very powerful tool. It's something that you want to harden with more security hardening, as much security hardening as possible, to avoid it being used against you. So what options are available to you to harden this? I've showed you earlier that you could go, when you're configuring the API, ensure that you only had IP addresses that should be making API calls to your system on this list. So that's one level of hardening that you could do, right? So the other thing that you could do is the accounts that we've been using initially. When we added the account, we just gave it the profile of an administrator. We probably don't want to do that in production. You probably want to split things up a bit and make it more restricted. So one option that you can have is we can restrict permissions of the API account. We can go on the web admin system profiles, device access, and create new roles as needed. So give you an illustration. If I go on the profiles, yeah, on the system profiles, on the device access, I could go create a new role. So this new role, let's just say I'll call it objects admin. And I said this role has no permissions for anything apart from it's got read write for objects and it's got read write for network. Right? So it's got read write for objects and it's got read write for network. And I save that. So you can see how granular this can get. You can define whether an account or a role as read, no access, read only, or read and write. So in this case, I'm saying you've got no access on the system. So it's got no access on anything on the system. It's got no access on the wireless protection or identity. In other words, it can do anything under this other component of the XG firewall apart from objects and network. And if I save that, so I have this new object admin role. So then I can go under the account that I created earlier on the authentication. So this is the East US firewall. I go on the users. I can now change the role of this user or the profile of this user from administrator to objects admin, and I can save that. And this is the East US firewall again. And let me do this similar thing on the, actually, you know what? Let me go do this on the East US firewall. So the same call that I made earlier, which is to create a new object, I'm going to be making it again, but this time on East US firewall. And let's see what happens. So let's change that to East US. And that is the option that creates a new host object. I also want the option that gets the existing object. So this gets the existing object. So let's run this. And I can list the existing objects. So that's on the East US, go under hosting profiles, or sorry, hosting services under IP host, and go make the other call that will create a new object called API test1. So let's make that again, paste and go. That's successful. Refresh. That's API test1 now, and I'll delete this. So what I'll do in this case is I'll now go make some modifications to that role on the profiles under device access and say now this object admins role on the objects and network is got read only, not read and write, and I save that. Now if I go back and if I try to make this call again, it says yeah, if I expand it for you to see, not having the privilege to add or modify configuration. Now if I try to still make the call where I just get information in a new tab, I can still get information, but I cannot modify information again, and that's because the role is now locked down here, where this object admin only has read-only access to objects and network. So you can use this as a great tool to lock down the accounts that you'll be using. So that's one good one. You can limit the IP to login for that user account or for that API account. So I go under authentication here, and I go on the users. I could do something like on the users, I could define you're only allowed to make API calls at certain times. I could define access time for this. So which is really, really good. So in that case, if I know that my scripts are going to be running at particular times, and don't want this active all the time, I could limit it, could limit the access time. I could even limit the restriction node to this particular account can only authenticate from a particular node, and I can put in the IP address here. So these are different ways that you can use to restrict that and to add in these accounts that you'll be using for your API calls and to lock this down. So that was a really, really long demo and explanation. I seriously hope that you found this useful and that you got something from this. I'll probably be releasing more videos in the future on how to even get more automation out of this system. This is a really powerful thing, and I really like it, and I hope that you do also. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the description below. I'll put in the description below links to some of the things that I've mentioned or discussed today so that you can get to them really easily. And also, again, just check out the Sophos XG Firewall. It's a really good network security appliance is out there, one of the best in the industries. I absolutely love it very much and I recommend it. So thanks very much. And actually, before I go, one last thing to mention is that all the demonstrations that I've done on the Sophos XG Firewall, I've done on Sophos XG Firewall hosted on Azure. So that's one other thing I recommend you to check out. So check out Sophos XG Firewall hosted on Azure. It's a good way to practice and get used to the system if you're not used to it. So check it out. Go to the Azure Marketplace, search for Sophos XG, and you find the firewall there. And thanks very much, and I'll see you in my next video.